cost a staggering 1 billion Uganda shillings. My colleague Ivan K. Walinyoro is speaking about refugees' welfare. I don't know whether that official he'll be talking to will be able to explain to us how this can happen, but let me leave it to him. A very good morning, Ivan.
Well, indeed, it's a very good morning, Chris, and I am coming to you from Nsambya, the central district of the country, and this is the urban setting. And we know very well that Uganda is one of the refugee hosting countries. Over 1.5 million people, refugees and also asylum seekers, and these numbers continue to rise each and every day when we have, conflicts in the neighborhood and the rest of all of this. But of course, we know very well that when refugees come to the country, a lot needs to be done, especially in terms of planning for them and the rest of all other things. Among them, or among some of the issues that come up, is their well-being, right to association into communities, recognition, among the rest. But I just want to speak to the Chief Executive Director of the refugee-led organization network here, where over 130 refugee organizations subscribe, to just discuss insights on what really happens and what are some of the ups and downs when it comes to understanding this concept. Jerry Lukendo, who is the Chief Executive Director of the refugee-led organizations in Uganda. Good morning and welcome with Morning at NTV.
Good morning, Mr. Ivan.
You have over 1.5 million people, refugees and asylum seekers in the country, but we're discussing their well-being, especially, let me say, to be specific, the central setting, but we can take a broader image of the country, their well-being.
So as you know, Uganda is known to have gotten an open door policy that allows refugees to come and live freely within this country.
Are you a refugee yourself?
Yes, I'm a refugee from DRC. I've been here for the last 15 years. I think I've enjoyed Uganda quite well.
Yes.
But really, to go back to the question, I think the open door policy has given refugees a number of rights, including what you mentioned, the right to associate. And this is one of the biggest rights that refugees have, because it has allowed them to create their employment opportunities, but also has really fostered the peaceful coexistence between the refugees and the host community. So, and I think that's why we are actually having this conversation this morning, to actually show some of these experiences, the job that refugees have created for the Ugandans, but also for themselves. Refugees do contribute. They have actually become taxpayers, just like normal Ugandans. So I think the need for all of us to protect specifically.
Okay, Jerry, why do we continue to have unrecognized refugees in the country, given the fact that we have the registration, the organizations that do this? Why do we still have them, those that are not known? Because if you're a refugee, you're an engineer in Uganda, the country must maybe take advantage of. But why do we continue to have these people that are not registered in two organizations?
I think really to answer that question very well, I wish we had OPM among us. OPM would really give us a great answer. But possibly I will really have something small to talk about that particular issue. South Sudanese, Congolese, and Sudanese refugees, they are given prima facie. So meaning when they are entering the country, they get their refugee status, I think, within the first 3 days of registration, which is something great, because we don't see that happen in other country. But unfortunately, at some point, specifically the Congolese refugees and the South Sudanese refugees, they don't register anymore in the urban setting, where the law allows them actually to also register in Kampala, but that has really been stopped abruptly. We don't know why. The government knows why. That's why I'm saying if we had OPM would really give clear answers to that.
Okay. How do you define your security in the country? I am told in the camps, Bidi, the rest, the people who look for the refugees, those who look after them, are even able to cross them. But the security of a refugee that comes into the country is protected by government fully.
Yeah, I think generally, I would say whenever you are law abounding, whether you are refugee or Ugandans, I think Uganda has really provided that conducive environment where I think everyone feels at home, including myself and my colleagues here. We really feel at home while we are here. But of course, there are those specific cases where we've had Rwandan refugees being abducted in this country. We don't know why, we don't know on which ground, but those are really extreme specific.
Okay, Jerry, I'm going to come back to you. Let me speak to a gentleman here. Good morning and welcome with me on Morning at NTV.
Good morning.
We're talking about the well-being of the refugees in the country. Are you one?
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Well, how do you define your well-being in Uganda and the right to association in the country?
Of course, as much as we talk about the Uganda progressive policies, it is in place, but at times there are gaps. We really recognize the fact that we have these policies in place. So I feel protected. And those, the gaps that exist, I think there may be, some of them may be structural, and some of them may be also isolated cases.
We are talking about also the right to employment. These policies are there. Do you feel you're being cared for? The refugees that are in Uganda, the children can go to school, can access health care, they have a right to employment in some of the organizational government institutions.
Of course they have. I know some few institutions like Opportunity Bank, like some other institutions that are there. I think refugees are being recognized and they're employed. However, you know, Uganda have progressive policies as we talked about, but you find that sometimes the gap is these policies are there, but there are lack of opportunities. That lack of opportunities is also faced by the Ugandans and as well as refugees.
Okay, let me also talk to Jero. Good morning, and what's your name and welcome with Morning at NTV.
Good morning, NTV. Good morning, Ivan. Thanks for having me. My name is Cole Arokol. I'm the advocacy officer for Reload Uganda, and at the same time, it's South Sudanese refugee.
Yes, we're talking about the well-being of refugees in Uganda. Are you being protected, cared for in as far as how the policies stand from government?
Well, first of all, I would really like to echo this again, to appreciate the people of Uganda and the government of Uganda for their comprehensive refugee response framework. That is something that has set an example around the world. So Uganda is a darling in this, and we have to give credit where it is deserved. And in terms of security, like my earlier speaker, our executive director said, this has been really great in this country.
Okay, what are some of the challenges that a refugee goes through? You are a refugee-led organization, and I know you tap direct into some of these challenges. What are some of the challenges that a refugee goes through in Uganda?
Well, recognizing that all these policies that Uganda has, the beautiful policies, of course there are gaps. When we talk about the refugee rights, there are difficulties, especially when it comes to right to associate. Under the Refugee Act 2006, it has given these beautiful rights. But then there are also authorities that that formulate, that bring these rights to practices, like the NGO Bureau, right? So to register an organization as a refugee, there are steps that you take.
Yes.
And these steps have been somehow complicated, especially when it comes to NGO Bureau. And this is the plea that we are making right now, to make sure that the same government policies are not contradicting each other, to make it as simple as possible for refugees to register the organizations. Then when it also comes to work, a great number of refugees have capabilities, they have the capacities, they have been to universities, they are carrying their documents, while also understanding that there is a big number of Ugandans who are not employed, so we understand that. But the number of refugees who are redundant, who are not employed, is really overwhelming, because that's something that we should talk about, because the government commits to it.
But we're also talking about recognizing these refugees. Some of them come into the country through porous borders. They're not registered. I do not know whether you are an engineer, so that maybe tomorrow I have a placement somewhere you can do. What are you doing as an organization to see that you recognize the refugees and they can be integrated for these positions or vacancies, if maybe they're somewhere?
Well, under this umbrella of the refugee-led organizations, we have seen refugees with great capabilities. And I think as a recommendation also to OPM, I think it would be really helpful if there is a clause that can register refugees, education background, capabilities. If you have a degree, it has to be indicated somewhere so that you can be accommodated when it comes to the jobs.
Okay. Can you walk just freely from where you are, your children access health services in the nearby, maybe health facility, education, the rest, if you are a refugee in Uganda?
Of course, we do. We do. We have access to health. Like I said before, the opportunities are there, but there is a limitation to these opportunities.
Okay. Okay, let me speak to Jerry once again. Jerry, you are the Chief Executive Director of the Refugee-Led Organization Network in Uganda. But we're talking about the challenges that a refugee goes through that you think maybe needs to be rectified by government so that you can have an ample welcome in the country.
Yes, thank you once again, Mr. Ivan. I think as my previous speaker has talked about some of these rights, specifically I want to focus on the right to associate, which to me I see as one of the biggest rights, because remember the Refugee Act 2006 gives the refugees all the other rights apart from the right to vote and be elected to public offices. So this simply means that we have this right to associate just like any other Ugandan, just like you, Mr. Ivan. So if you need to have your NGO be registered with NGO Bureau as a local entity, refugees are also given this right to register their NGO as local entities.
Okay.
Now, there is one point I want to make.
30 seconds.
Yes. Now, when you look at the Refugee Act 2006 has given the refugees these rights, but the NGO Act does not actually recognize that the fact that much as we are foreigners, but we have this special category where we have to be treated as refugees. So the refugee status shouldn't be seen as a status of it has to be seen as a status of protection, rather than being seen as a status where we are treated as yes, we are foreigners, but let's really consider this status of protection that we have and be given back our rights as the government has provided them to us.
Jerry, my producer says we have run out of time, but it's a good insight to share with you the refugee conversation, and thank you really for making time, you people, to speak to us this beautiful morning.
Thank you so much, Ivan. We really do appreciate the service NTV is bringing to the community.
Well, the well-being of the refugees, the right of association and integration into communities has been the conversation here in Zambia, where I've also just been speaking to some of the leaders to the refugee organizations. But of course, for time reasons, we will not exceed this, and I want to appreciate the audience on behalf of the entire team that has been manning the morning show. That for today, we will wrap it up here until tomorrow when we'll resume the same time. Good morning to you and our audience.